this is a little bit about leadership as well. Joe talked about bankruptcy. Joe, if my memory is correct, you helped write that bankruptcy bill.
I did not.
All right?
And
that bankruptcy bill, by the way, when we talk about education, we got 45 million people in America struggling with student debt, some of them really struggling with student debt. And that bankruptcy bill made it impossible, very difficult for people to escape from that student debt. It was a very, very bad bill. You said, Joe, that a majority of the people in the Senate voted for it. You're right.
Overwhelming majority.
Overwhelmingly. Well, I voted against it in the House, and I was right. And I don't have to rethink my position because that's what leadership is about, having the guts to take an unpopular vote. But it's not just bankruptcy. The difference between Joe and I on higher education is 4 years ago. It was not a popular idea, Joe. I'm glad you're coming around now. 4 years ago, when I said that public colleges and universities should be tuition-free, people were saying, Bernie, that's a radical idea. Well, you got states and cities and counties all over the country that are moving in that direction. And I'm glad that Joe is on board. But what leadership is about is going forward when it's not popular, when it's an idea that you get criticized for. So I'm proud of that fact, and I'm proud of my leadership on many issues. Joe, since the campaign, has come around. I talked about raising that minimum wage $15 an hour 4 years ago, Joe.
So did I, and I went out and campaigned
$15 an hour?
$15 an hour, New York City. Go talk to the governor.
I will talk to the governor. I'm not aware of that.
All right?
I am not aware of that.
You should be aware. Look.
All right, 4 years ago, it was a radical idea. Very few people in Congress were talking about it.
Go ahead, Vice President.
Well, here, look. Let's get something straight about the bankruptcy bill. The bankruptcy bill already, it did not affect student debt for 90% because the law had already been passed. You could not declare bankruptcy for those loans that were from private institutions. You couldn't do it. And so the bankruptcy bill didn't affect that. It affected 10% of the people, the first bankruptcy bill, 10% of the student loans, number one. Number two, now we're in a position where we're able to correct that problem. The fact is, if I hadn't stepped up and changed the law as it relates to people making less than $50,000, those who for alimony and child support, then guess what? They would have been in the bucket too. It was going to pass anyway. I made it. Let me finish. I made it incrementally better. I did not like the bill. I did not support the bill, and I made it clear to the industry I didn't like the bill. Number two, this bill now calls for the opportunity to fundamentally change the mistakes we couldn't correct in the bill the first time around. And that is why I support Elizabeth Warren's idea. And it's a very good idea.
Senator Sanders, go ahead.
Well, this is kind of circular logic. We're going to reform the bill that I voted for. Well, if you hadn't voted for it, and if you had rallied other people, as I try to do in the House voting against it, we might not have the problems with it we have today. You know, what leadership is about, Joe, and it deals with legislation regarding gay communities and the so-called Defense of Marriage Act. You remember that bill, right? You remember the Defense of Marriage Act. It was, you know, gay marriage today is considered a little bit differently than it was 25 years ago. I remember that vote. It was a very hard vote. I voted against the Defense of Marriage Act. You voted for it. I voted against the bankruptcy bill. You voted for it. I voted against the war in Iraq, which was also a tough vote. You voted for it. I voted against disastrous trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China, which cost this country over 4 million good-paying jobs. You voted for it. I voted against the Hyde Amendment, which denies low-income women the right to get an abortion. You have consistently voted for it. I don't know what your position is on it today, but you have consistently voted for it. In other words, all that I'm saying here is that in this time of crisis, when we're living in a really, really unsettling world, economically, from a healthcare perspective with the coronavirus, the people of America know my record, okay? For 30 years, I have stood with the working families of this country. I have taken on every special interest there is out there, and that is what I will do in the White House. That's a very different record than Joe's.
That is not a different record than mine.
That is a totally different record than yours, all right? I mean, and it's manifested in this campaign when you're, you know, getting all this money from, you know, wealthy people and billionaires. So I think if you want somebody who will take to the White House what I've done for my whole life.
Thank you, Senator Sanders.